I'm Michelle Beckham-Corbin, president of C3 Creating Connections Consulting, a social media strategy firm.
And I'm Mark Macomber, president of Macomber Creations, and welcome to our show,
Digitally Speaking. If you tuned in to our show last month or found us on YouTube, show number 13 discussed recent Facebook changes. So Facebook came out with a lot of changes to not only pages for business, but also they made some changes to things that we see in our news feed as far as personal use of Facebook. So we had a very animated discussion about those changes. And as we mentioned last time, there's one thing that we've learned about social media since its inception is that change will occur often and constantly. So.
It's like the weather in Cincinnati.
Yeah. Wait a couple hours and it might change.
It'll change.
Well, today we wanted to take a different direction and talk about some of the social concerns that we now find our world in because of social media. Some sticky situations, just some things that are happening to people that would not have happened I don't think I want to go past 10, maybe 10, 12 years ago since the inception of social media. So what do you think about that, Mark?
Well, it's interesting because in the I should say older days, which isn't that long ago, word would spread not like wildfire, but it would just kind of get out there, and it would take a while, and maybe somebody heard about something, and it was word of mouth that communicated, or somebody talking to someone else. But again, because of our social media outlet and all of the great connections that we have digitally, that it's instantaneous. Word gets out, and it could be getting out to hundreds, thousands, if not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of people, depending on what the message is and who it's coming from. So the access for information on any level, whatever it be, and it can be personal, it can be business, can get out very, very quickly. So hence our topic today and why this is so important, to be able to maybe mitigate or correct or change something very, very quickly if the wrong information gets out.
Yeah, and I think that because social media is in real time, I think that really gets to what you're saying in terms of the speed of the information. And when you look at situations, I call them kind of oops situations, where you have folks that are working on behalf of a company doing social media, and of course they have their own social media. So let's use Twitter as an example. They might have their own private Twitter account, and then they're tweeting on behalf of a client. And we've already seen several situations of people mistakenly being on the wrong Twitter account. So maybe tweeting some personal thoughts, but on a business account. And I think one of the, excuse me, it's an old story, but one of the most jarring and often used today is the example from a couple of years ago where a young man was working for a marketing firm on behalf of Chrysler Auto, and he thought he was on his personal Twitter account, and he was on Chrysler and tweeted something about, it had expletives in it, but something about the fact that the people in Detroit don't know how to drive and some other information, and that went out on Chrysler Auto. And so not only, the shot heard around the world, right? The tweet heard around the world. Not only did he lose his job, but that that marketing firm was fired as well. So that's just kind of one of the classic examples of tweeting mistakenly. But we've talked a lot about Facebook, and as I opened the show with the mention that our last show was all about Facebook changes, I think one of the things that we have to deal with, from a social aspect today is, what do we do with our so-called friends on Facebook? What do you do, Mark, when you friend someone and then later realize that you wish you hadn't, but maybe you don't want to hit the delete button because of, PC reasons or whatever. I mean, whether it's the situation where maybe their Facebook postings are kind of ranty and you don't want to be associated, or whether you've kind of fallen out of favor with the person. I mean, have you personally had any of those kinds of situations where you wanted to get rid of somebody?
I have, but I'm probably unlike a lot of people that, and maybe not. Maybe there's a lot of similarity to how I run my Facebook page, so to speak.
Or your profile, right? Profile.
Yes, and I think one of the things is it takes me a while to. I'm not really in a hurry to have a ton of friends or just friend anybody. I do a little research. I check their page out. I do some things, see what kind of posts that they put up anyway before I actually friend them. And there's usually, for me, there's a reason for friending them. It's usually a similarity in professions or something where I think is going to make a difference. Because Facebook to me is such a marketing tool, even my personal page, because of the way I do business. But I think there are ways around that, and even to address the tweet issue. I think the tweet issue, I think one of the challenges when you're managing all these multiple accounts, it's not much different than all the passwords that you have to hold or have some kind of special top secret notebook you have all this stuff in. It's just really keeping grips on what account you're working with at that time. If that young man who had worked for Chrysler had really paid attention a little tighter before he hit the button, he would have realized that, oh man, I'm operating on the same device, but I've got 2 or 3 accounts going at the same time. I better be sure that I'm not sending it to the wrong account.
Right. It's just taking that extra
Checks and
little
balances.
half a second.
Yeah, just
right.
Yeah.
For people though that are kind of wondering what to do about the people that they don't really want to be friends with anymore. Some of the things that you can do, obviously, are unfriend or get rid of the account. But you can also use lists, and lists allow you to kind of determine what level of viewing will each person have. And you can even take a list to the furthest point and put people on a restricted list. If they're on a restricted Facebook list, that means that they can only see what you share publicly. So that's a way to, you always have these situations. For example, let's say you've got a coworker and you're friends, and then later on that person becomes your boss. Do you really want your boss seeing all of your personal stuff, right?
Yeah.
But you don't want to delete the person, so maybe you move them to that extra ring of security.
Well, those are great options too, and it's nice that Facebook has developed those filters, if you will.
Filters, right, right. And then if there are people that you don't want to put them in the ring of restricted level, but you just don't want to see their posts, maybe they are too ranty for you, you can actually hide their posts. So you remain friends, but then you just don't have to see their stuff in your news feed. So
and of course they don't know what level they're on.
They never get the message saying what you did to them. So that's really nice. Now the one thing that I see, and I'm sure sociologists are probably looking at this right now, I really see that because of the way we're communicating with social media, that younger people who've literally grown up with this are really, I just see issues with traditional communication, and some people not really knowing how to communicate well, whether it's in writing. At P&G, we used to say, P&G was infamous for the one-page memo, making sure it's very concise, getting all your information there. But whether it's writing or whether it's verbalization, I really think that that face-to-face communication, or I should say, offline communication is really going to suffer, and I think along with that is the fact that so much of our communication is online, and it lends itself to some level of anonymity. Whether you visit a blog and you're able to comment using a gravatar and not your true identity, or even anonymous, or even if you look at some of the news sites, even in our own city in Cincinnati, you can go look at the Inquirer online and people have the opportunity to comment. And boy, when you're alone in your room or on your phone or wherever you are making these comments, people let loose.
Sure they do.
and they say things that I don't
Yeah.
think that they would have said to you to your face.
Well, and I mean, the point of this is a topic of so many conversations that I have about interpersonal communication and the art of interpersonal communication, which is a true art form. And I know people with masters and doctorates in communications that are in marketing. And one of the things that's so important, you've lost the art of nuance, you've lost the art of semantics, you've lost the art of a lot of things that portray communication and the things that take place in a face-to-face, eye-to-eye.
Even body language.
Everything. It's
Yeah.
all of that, and it becomes it's. I won't use the term dumbed down because I don't know that that's really the way to articulate that. But I think what you do is you lose so much of interpretation, and you lose so much of again, the emotion and the nuance that goes along with real communication, that it's lost when you go through a device. Now, I'm not saying that you can't get concept across. You have to be a much better writer, because you now are trying to articulate a thought or really get a concept across to somebody. It takes a lot more words sometimes, because you don't have the ability to look somebody in the eye and say, hey, this is how I feel about this, or this is what I think is a really great idea, and this is why.
Yeah, and even the tone. For example, today I'm working on a project for a client, and I'm working with a graphic designer on our team, and he wanted some feedback on his design, and I quickly wrote back, some written feedback, emailed it to him. But when I had an opportunity to speak to him on the phone, I said, I just wanted to convey to you what great work you did.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Right.
And that sense of excitement just doesn't come through.
It doesn't
two
come through.
sentences in an email.
It doesn't come through. There aren't enough emoticons in the world, ladies and gentlemen, unless you design your own. And I've thought about that, as a matter of fact, and that's topic for another discussion another day. But I totally agree with you, and I think that's a really important piece of this.
Yeah.
And leads into could be a topic for an entire show about the impact of how all this is playing on society, sociologically speaking.
Yeah, it'd be great to get a professor to come in and be a guest on our show, somebody that might be kind of working in this area.
Yeah.
Well, for every, person who's spouting off anonymously to the online bullies that, a lot of kids have to deal with, and maybe even some adults, to the trolls, and we've talked about trolls on the show before, the folks that are there online to just purposely cause mischief, that's one aspect of the social concerns of social media. I think another piece that really is becoming quite evident is death. And what happens when someone dies, and someone who has had several social media sites, and maybe they are their passwords were kind of stored here. I know personally, I've had this happen to me twice. Once on Facebook and once on LinkedIn, where I get the little algorithmic message, people you may know, and I see their face and I think, oh my gosh, I know them, and I know that they've passed on. So I just think that's a very, that's a brand new social situation that we have to deal with.
Well, it is, and because things are so widely covered through the social media that let's just say family members or someone may not realize the extent of how somebody may have been active in social media, and does someone take over, and all of the, as you say, just the perfunctory pieces of knowing the passwords and how to either disassemble the site or the Facebook page or whatever it is, or in the event that, I can think of instances where it may be advantageous to keep the page going if the
like
person,
a tribute page,
or if tribute, or if it was a business person involved in a business and they still. There's an affiliation, and maybe there was still an ownership that passed to family members, but they may have been a very important person in getting that business growing, and that may stay on as a figurehead. I know that to be true from some friends that have been involved in the music business who have passed away, and their sibs or brothers or administrators would take it over and manage the page, and still kept it up, and probably will for years.
And that's the key, though, is managing, right?
Yes.
So to be able to manage it, make sure you don't have trolls that are going to come on
Right.
and mess around with it.
Right.
They've got to have access.
Yeah, they keep their eye on it. They can't
Well,
just
but
let it.
I mean those passwords. They've
Oh,
got to
absolutely.
have
Sure.
that actual access. There was a story that was kind of making the rounds. I want to say towards the end of last year, 2013. Where a young man, I think maybe he was 20 or 21, had died, and the family did not have access to his passwords for Facebook, and they wanted to bring the page down. And they tried, to contact Facebook. They were getting nowhere. That's a whole nother issue. That could be a show too in terms of hearing back from Facebook. But anyway, so the father made a plea on YouTube in a video to try to get that message out, and it went viral, and people spread it, and then finally Facebook, jumped in and gave them access. But, I think today people, as they get their, create their wills and their all that information, I think that it's very important to make sure that they're creating a list of the Facebook passwords. And I agree with you, for young people, you could have teenagers that are involved in a lot of different sites, like let's say Snapchat even, that parents don't even know what that is. They've never even heard of it. They wouldn't even think to go looking for it.
Sure.
So that's another tough situation.
A lot to it. I mean, there's so many different roads that sprout off from social media that are all still integral. Yeah.
Well, and then that gets us to information about people who are kind of battling, whether it's a couple going through a divorce or some other family issue. And the courts have come out and said that information on social media can be used in court. And it's really interesting. I was doing some research on this, and it could be anything from, let's say, a court is trying to establish spousal support. Right? And so you can look at social media and get an idea of what is their lifestyle,
Very easily.
And even checking with social media sites like Instagram or Foursquare. Have they checked into the 5-star restaurant lately? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And
you haven't paid your child support, but you're having dinner at a 5-star. So what's up with that?
So it could even be, not information that you're sharing, like I just, went on this vacation in Hawaii, blah, blah, blah. But it could be the fact that you innocently took a picture and put it on Instagram of the beach in Waikiki, and all of that can be used. So gotta watch out.
Well, and much like anything else, once it's actually been published per se and has been, shown on social media, it kind of becomes part of public domain, and then therefore, whether it's actually true or not, could be used for you or against you, depending on that, and someone would have to then prove. But the fact that it's there is more witnessing to whatever it is.
I think a lot of divorce attorneys are just telling their clients to unplug from all social media.
Yeah, I was going to say divorce attorneys would have a heyday with this.
Oh, yeah.
That's an easy one.
But that gets to a topic that you and I were kind of chatting about before the show opened, and that's copyrighted materials. I put a little note out on my Facebook just for friends to kind of comment about sticky situations that they see with social media, and 2 people actually shared copyright. One actually is a photographer, and the other person creates content for education. And so I really think there's a huge problem with copyright, and I want to hear your perspective on that. And then I want to just say, to start off, that I think in a lot of cases it's just ignorance, that people don't realize what they're doing. But tell me what your thoughts are about what's happening with people kind of using images, music, etc.
Well, copywriting boils down to a great degree that in some form it's an art form, whatever it is. You're protecting something, whatever that is, in a legal form. That whether it's a song, a piece of art, a design, a photograph of something, there was someone that originated that, and maybe they're making a living out of it. Maybe they're professional, maybe they're semi-pro, but it's still a piece of art or something that they created that belongs to them, exclusively to them. And this has been rampant and huge in the music industry for years and years and years, and in the design industry, because one comes up with a great design, or even for that matter, I'll use photography right now, because it's probably an easier one to correlate. Somebody takes a really great picture of something, And all of a sudden, the person starts using this photo, or a lot of people go, that's a cool photo, let's start using it. It starts appearing all over the place. And let's say the guy was a photographer, or let's say he was starting a new business, and let's say he didn't realize he better emblazon his logo and stamp at the bottom, and he better put a little disclaimer that says on it that say this is the sole property of whatever Joe Photo's photography and can only be used with express written permission. If it's used in any other way than that, and we haven't given you the rights to do that, you're subject to copyright infringement, essentially, because you published this photo and now everybody's picking up on it using it. It'd be no different than writing a song and somebody stealing half of it and saying, I wrote this song, it sounds just like that song. Well, wait a minute, it hasn't made any money yet, so it doesn't matter, but all of a sudden it's a big hit and somebody goes, hey, George Harrison, you stole half of our really, really good song. And he goes, well, I didn't really mean to, it just was like that, but how much do you want? And they'll write a check and everything's fine. But design is even just as much people looking at something going, that's really, really cool, I'm going to use that idea in my next thing, and see if anybody notices. Well, architects, designers, their designs belong to them. It's just by the fact that they've published them and they're out, and most of the time when they do drawings or do designs, there's something down at the bottom that says these are expressly belong to whoever it is, whether it's a person or a company, and cannot be used. Intellectual information is something that's even, it probably has grayer areas, because concepts, things that haven't been totally worked out yet it's a concept for something, whether it's a business or concept for a business or concept for whatever. Could be an advertising plan, it could be a marketing plan, it could be something on that level. That's why people write confidentiality
agreements,
releases, and if somebody came up with a great idea and they want somebody to look at it, or they want somebody to potentially invest in it, or a bank to fund it, next thing you know, somebody comes along and hears about it, sees it, and decides to capitalize on it or plagiarize it. It has to give you protection, because let's face it, the development of any of those types of things could take years to put together. Plans to do that, whether it be a design. Even a photographer spends years learning his trade, or a songwriter years learning the trade to come up with something, and it would be unfortunate that somebody that took it and capitalized on it before that person had a chance to. So it's become a really huge thing, and there are quite a few attorneys that are just now specializing in this kind of law, because it's with social media, especially websites and the digital world, it's become a whole new.
Well, and especially in previous shows, we've talked about how visual media is so huge today. Mm-hmm. And so where I see this really coming into play is with photography. Mm-hmm. And people, like let's say on Facebook, small businesses are really businesses wanting to find images that kind of go along with whatever they're trying to say on
Sure.
Facebook, and just doing an image search and pulling that down,
right,
and just using it.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think that's a huge situation. The other thing, I think, talking about images, that schools are really kind of getting into is what happens when a student posts a picture or is tagged in a picture that is ultimately public, let's say on Facebook, of them using drugs or alcohol. And let's say they're an athlete, and that is a direct violation of the athletic code, meaning removal from a team. And so, what happens with that? I mean, I know we can't answer that question.
Reputation management, we've had a show that specialized in, hey, kids, watch what you...
Oh, right, from that perspective, right. But then on the other end, once that picture's already out there and somehow a teacher sees it, and then the administration, do they have grounds to remove the student? So, these are just big questions that
I think the kids would say, busted. I think that's their term. Yeah. Oh boy, I wasn't thinking about that one. But with all due respect to the kid that might have got caught, or, a photo taken of them, may not have even known that somebody was going to post that. So It again kind of falls back to be careful what you do, because there may be a whole cyberspace eyes upon you.
Well, actually, speaking of that, I came across, it's kind of a nice segue for this, I came across a company that is coming out with a new product that's called Social Navigator. And rather than me kind of fumble and trying to describe what they do, I will just read this. They've got this product called Life Raft, and it's an intelligent big data platform that enables schools and law enforcement agencies to understand what is being said on social media channels, the context of the conversation, and zero in on the locations where people are posting all in real time. So basically, it's kind of like, having the headphones on and kind of tuning into the teenage chatter. So, with a combination of law enforcement and schools involved. So I found that it's a brand new product that's just coming out. I found that very fascinating.
Well, there was a whole scene in Batman: The Dark Knight about that, when Batman, tells one of his guys, he says, "Hey, look," and he walks into this big room, and it's nothing but all these digital screens, and he goes, "You've actually taken every cell phone in Gotham and turned it into a transmitter." And he goes, "Yeah, and I trust you to monitor that, because I got to get the Joker," So, but the concept was there even a few years ago for this, and this is all burgeoned out of this privacy world that we've entered into after 9/11, that everybody's so in arms about the privacy laws, about what is the government allowed to do, where are these platforms, and how much can they really pry into your personal world. The technology's there, and certainly has been there for a while for them to be able to monitor us and see what we do.
Oh,
so
yeah,
you better behave
big
yourselves,
brother.
ladies and gentlemen, because
Big
it
brother.
is possible.
Well, I wanted to close just on a positive in terms of social changes. There was a dad who, he and his wife had a newborn who was born with some issues, and died at the age of 6 weeks, and was in the hospital the entire time, hooked up to monitors and all kinds of things. And he put a picture of his baby with the monitors, posted a plea on Reddit, and said, "Our daughter has died. We have no pictures of her unencumbered. Could someone out there Photoshop this image?"
Oh my God.
He received 3,000 comments.
Oh, wow.
And lots of beautiful Photoshopped images of his baby. And we'll make sure that we have some for folks to see. I can show you right here.
Oh.
But what a wonderful gift that these graphic folks could do for this family. So even though we've touched on some things that are kind of sticky, death, divorce, etc., social media still has a lot of room for good.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the world is an oyster when it comes to social media, because there's so many positives to it. We just have to learn to navigate through the negatives, and it's the more you know, right?
That's right. That's why watching Digitally Speaking, produced by actv.org, will help you to stay in the know with all of these sticky challenges of life.
Well, having said that, ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you once again for viewing Digitally Speaking and coming back to us each month to watch our latest and greatest. And so on behalf of Michelle and myself and ACTV, and we really like to thank you again, the viewing audience, for supporting us and coming back to see us. So don't miss the next episode. It'll be great. Thanks for joining us.